Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, if Republicans today were not willing to use budget reconciliation and depart from appropriations in order to pass a funding bill that would restore funding to ICE and CBP, then what would happen is my Democrat colleagues would be able to achieve what many of them have held for a long time as their objective and have publicly stated was their objective, and that's to defund immigration enforcement, border enforcement, and to abolish ICE. That's effectively what would happen if Republicans didn't act using budget reconciliation to fund ICE and CBP. And that would send us back to the dark ages, to the 4 years of open borders and the unprecedented lawlessness and chaos and crime, with people and crime and gangs and drugs pouring into our communities, into our states, throughout our entire country, jeopardizing the safety of the American people. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone at this point in this country that that is the stated or unstated goal of some of my colleagues. And certainly it is the well-articulated and cited objective of the left. And quite frankly, a lot of this shutdown and a lot of this obstruction is really the Democrat Party pandering to the left. But what would happen is the same thing that happened for 4 years when we had a commander-in-chief who refused to uphold his sacred oath to enforce the laws. He refused, with Democrat control of Congress and the White House, refused to enforce the laws and secure our sovereign border, and basically surrendered our sovereignty and safety to the paramilitary terrorist drug cartels on the other side of the border, who were glad to make more money off of trafficking people than they did drugs. And we had, as a result, we had a complete meltdown in states like Texas, who spent billions of dollars and were completely overwhelmed. It's almost unfathomable today to think about it, Madam Chair, because we have a daily apprehension number at about 196. But the average illegal crossing or apprehension under the Biden-Harris administration was over 5,000. And I assure you, we would repeat that, and it would be disastrous if we didn't do the right thing, if we didn't govern our great country, if we didn't open up the people's government and fund the important offices of ICE and CBP. For 76 days, our Democrat colleagues held hostage the American people's safety and security. They held hostage the hardworking people at the Department of Homeland Security. It wasn't just ICE and CBP. We were completely dark at Homeland Security. We didn't have the safety protocols being administered by TSA. We didn't have our Coast Guardsmen keeping watch to prevent a terrorist attack at our ports. We didn't have CISA agents preventing an attack on our critical infrastructure. And of course, we didn't have ICE and CBP functioning to enforce laws and to secure our border. That is the dysfunction we have been dealing with, and we just said enough's enough. Okay? We were sent here by the American people who gave President Trump an overwhelming victory. Every swing state, the popular vote, the electoral vote, gave us unified Republican leadership in Congress. And the number one reason they did that was to restore the rule of law and to put the American people's safety and security first. And that's exactly what we're doing today, in spite of the obstruction. And listen, your granddad and my granddad taught us the same thing. If somebody tells you what they want to do and who they are, believe them. And for years, we've been hearing this incendiary and dangerous rhetoric that ICE needed to be defunded. Governor Tim Walz said that ICE officers are an actual threat. These are the people risking their lives to defend us, to protect us in our communities. That ICE was a threat to the public. Governor Pritzker said ICE was turning the country into Nazi Germany. Chuck Schumer said ICE doesn't belong in our neighborhoods. Senator John Hickenlooper said that ICE was a reign of terror. All of this, while the risks have increased because of the shutdown, we have an 8,000% increase in threats to the lives of our ICE agents and Border Patrol agents. A 1,300% increase in assaults. And these are the dangerous games that my Democrats are playing. To obstruct the president so they can go brag as they pander to the left. But again, the reality is it's a de facto defunding of law enforcement and abolishing of ICE. And we will prevent that today because I'm confident that my friends in the Republican conference will do the right thing and put the American people and their safety first. Madam Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time. Those are my opening remarks.
And the gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania for 30 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection.
I want to start by reminding the American people that last year, Republicans passed Reconciliation 1.0, what President Trump and my Republican colleagues proudly boasted at the time was, and I quote, the big, beautiful bill. Notice you don't hear much about it anymore. Why? Because the American people figured out what was in it. The bill became one of the most unpopular pieces of legislation to pass Congress in decades, with disapproval more than 2-to-1 over approval. And the reason is simple, because it hurts America's families. The bill cut health care for 15 million Americans and raised health care costs for millions more. It made the largest cuts to food assistance in American history. It added trillions of dollars to the national debt, and all to help pay for the largest tax breaks for billionaires in our nation's history. That is the Republican record. They cut health care, they cut food assistance, they raised costs on working families, they exploded the debt, and then they handed the biggest benefits to billionaires. At the same time, this administration has failed miserably on the economy. We all remember Donald Trump campaigning in my home state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and across this country, promising the American people he would, quote, lower prices on day one. Well, here we are, just past day 500, and costs are higher than ever. President Trump's reckless tariff taxes have driven up costs for families and businesses. And as if that wasn't bad enough, his choice of war in Iran has helped send gas prices soaring, a more than 50% increase in just a matter of months. Families are paying more at the pump, they're paying more at the grocery store, they're paying more for health care. And so with that, you would think that in Reconciliation 2.0, the Republican majority might actually want to do something to fix that situation, to fix the mess they created. But no, this bill does not include one dime to help American families pay for the crushing costs that they bear. And on top of all of that, we have the president who is continuing to openly say He wants to give billions of taxpayer money to January 6th insurrectionists. And even though a vast majority of the American people oppose that obnoxious notion, there is nothing in this bill to prevent that from happening. Madam Speaker, the American people deserve better than a bill that does nothing to lower costs, nothing to help families, nothing to stop Donald Trump from rewarding violent criminals who attacked our Capitol. We deserve better. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Madam Chair, I have the greatest respect for my friend from Pennsylvania, but that's about as good of Washington obfuscation as I've ever heard. We're talking about funding ICE and CBP. If we don't do it today, ICE and CBP doesn't exist. Criminals are running around in our streets. We don't make good on the promises the American people sent us here to do. They want to talk about tax policy. And by the way, they are the party that didn't lift a finger when the tax cuts were going to expire and cause over $1,000 for every family in this country a tax hike. And it would have been a 22% tax hike. This on the heels of a cost of living crisis that they created by their failed economic policies and their unbridled spending, the likes of which we haven't seen in a half a century. So we can go through tax policy and the consequences of the American people having more money in their pockets because of no tax on tips and overtime, seniors getting a double deduction who are on a fixed income, people who have suffered from Joe Biden's unaffordability crisis. I'm happy to go down the line on that. People have more money in their pockets. The economy's growing. Inflation's down. Interest rates are down. The American people were paying $1,000 a month more in their mortgage as a result of the failed policies of my Democrat colleagues. But today, this isn't the debate. The debate is the safety of the American people and resourcing our brave, hardworking law enforcement officers who put their lives on the line to keep us safe. With that, let me yield 3 minutes to my friend from the great state of Ohio and our Judiciary Committee Chairman, Mr. Jim Jordan.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank the gentleman for yielding. We have to use reconciliation because Democrats won't pay the guys who enforce the law. I mean, we should have had this done 110 days ago when they shut down the Department of Homeland Security. And then they said, oh, we'll fund that, but we're not going to fund ICE and CBP. And this is all part of their scheme, their plan, their systematic plan they have, multi-step plan. First, they let in 10 million migrants in the Biden administration. Open border, let in 10 million. Then, second, they create sanctuary jurisdictions, which makes it difficult to remove those migrants when they commit another crime. And third, they say, we're not going to pay the guys to do the removing, we're not going to fund ICE. That's their plan. Systematically executing that plan. Let in 10 million with an open border, create sanctuary jurisdictions, which, by the way, I always remind folks of this. What is sanctuary jurisdiction? Politicians telling local law enforcement, don't work with federal law enforcement when it comes to enforcing the law. Dumbest thing I've ever heard. But that's going on in almost a third of the country. 18 cities, 11 states, 3 counties in the District of Columbia. And then third, of course, don't fund ICE. It's not enough to have all the left-wing crazies out on the street, doxing them, tracking them, spitting on them, yelling at them, swearing at them, and assaulting them. Now they're saying we're not going to pay you. That is their plan. And frankly, you could add a fourth step. We had this hearing in our committee a couple weeks ago. You get a fourth step. Some of these prosecutors in these sanctuary jurisdictions, like right over in Virginia in Fairfax County, some of these prosecutors actually take into account the immigration status of someone who's committed a crime when they decide what they're going to charge him with and what kind of plea agreement they're going to have. Mr. Descano, his policy is if American citizen commits a crime, illegal migrant commits the same crime, illegal migrant gets a better deal. That is just crazy. And again, they will go to any length to execute this plan. Let in 10 million, create sanctuary jurisdictions, don't pay the guys who do the removing, and don't prosecute the people who commit crimes. They shut down the government 42 days last fall, 70 days of Homeland Security this spring, now upwards of 100 days for ICE and CBP. So I want to thank the great budget chairman for the work his committee has done. This is the right bill to do. It's unfortunate we have to do it this way, but this is the only way to pay the guys who actually enforce the laws that the Congress of the United States passes. I would urge a yes vote and yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Madam Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from the Commonwealth of Virginia, the distinguished ranking member of the Education and Workforce Committee, also a member of the Budget Committee, Mr. Scott.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, while working families struggle with high costs caused by this administration, Republicans' only focus is on spending more money for their lawless immigration enforcement agenda, even as ICE continues to abuse its authority and without any assurance that they will begin obeying the law by obtaining warrants before they go into people's homes, stop deporting citizens, and stop using excessive force. While Americans face increased costs, the president seems only interested about building his ballroom, rewarding violent insurrectionists, and putting his face on passports and $250 bills. This reconciliation bill does nothing to block these initiatives, and it does also nothing to reduce gas prices, improve health care, preserve the Department of Education, or create jobs. And let's not forget this bill also increases the deficit after the first bill last year increased the deficit by trillions of dollars. But that's not a surprise because every Democratic administration since Kennedy has left for the Republicans a better deficit than they inherited, and every Republican administration since Nixon has left for the Democrats a worse deficit situation, all without exception. We need to be focused on a fiscally responsible solution that will actually do something to bring down costs for American families. This bill doesn't do that, so I urge my colleagues to vote no on this legislation. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Again, Madam Speaker, you're going to hear gas prices, tax policy, health care, ballrooms. You're not going to hear anything about what's happening as a result of my Democrats not supporting us funding ICE and CBP, because defunding ICE and CBP after the 4 years of chaos and lawlessness is just completely indefensible. And with that, I yield to the gentleman from the great state of Georgia, Mr. Buddy Carter, for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Madam Speaker, I rise today infuriated by my Democratic colleagues who have put the safety and the security of American citizens last. First, they opened the border to millions of unvetted illegal immigrants. Now they have repeatedly refused to fund Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Customs and Border Protection agents, failing in the #1 responsibility of elected officials, keeping our citizens safe. The consequences have been devastating for families. Take, for instance, my district. Linda Davis, a beloved special education teacher at Hess K-8 schools in Savannah, was killed by an illegal immigrant who rammed into her while fleeing law enforcement. Danny Sharp, a husband, a father, a son, he was killed by an illegal immigrant who was driving under the influence and without a license in Effingham County. And then, of course, in the state of Georgia, Laken Riley, a bright nursing student who was murdered while out for what should have been a pleasant jog in Athens. Linda Davis, Danny Sharp, Laken Riley, these are real people who should be with us today. Their families have experienced unimaginable pain because of these reckless politics. It's time for Democrats to do the right thing. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Madam Speaker, it's now my great pleasure to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New York, the distinguished Democratic leader of the House, Mr. Jeffries.
Thank my good friend and colleague, Representative Brendan Boyle from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, for yielding and for his leadership. Madam Speaker, I rise today in strong opposition to this Republican scheme to waste $70 billion in taxpayer money to give a blank check to ICE without any guardrails, any oversight, or any accountability. Immigration enforcement in this country should be fair, it should be just, and it should be humane. That's not what is going on right now as it relates to Donald Trump's violent mass deportation machine. Donald Trump promised America that he would target violent felons who are here illegally. But instead, taxpayer dollars are being used by ICE and his violent mass deportation machine to target and brutalize American citizens, in some cases killing them, as was the case in Minneapolis with Renee Nicole Good and Alex Preddy, or to violently target law-abiding immigrant families, children, and in some cases, veterans who've served this country. As Democrats, we believe that taxpayer dollars should be used to make life more affordable for the American people, as opposed to what the one big ugly bill represented and continues to represent in this Congress. Republicans making a decision to rip away health care and nutritional assistance from the American people, the largest cut to Medicaid in American history, alongside the largest cut to nutritional assistance in American history, literally stealing food from the mouths of hungry children, veterans, and seniors in order, in the one big ugly bill, to give ICE and Donald Trump's violent mass deportation machine a $140 billion blank check. And as if that wasn't enough, ripping health care and nutritional assistance away from vulnerable Americans, hardworking American taxpayers, working class Americans, middle class Americans, and those who aspire to be part of the middle class. As if ripping health care and nutritional assistance in the one big ugly bill wasn't enough, Republicans have now come back for more, to give ICE and Donald Trump's violent mass deportation machine another $70 billion blank check with no oversight, no accountability, and no guardrails. We believe immigration enforcement should be fair, just, and humane, that ICE needs to be brought under control, and that ICE needs to conduct itself like every other cop, every other police officer, and every other law enforcement agency in this country. But instead, Republicans have decided to continue to waste taxpayer dollars to jam Donald Trump's extreme right-wing ideology down the throats of the American people. And so as Democrats, we rise in strong opposition to this Republican scheme, waste of taxpayer dollars. Donald Trump promised that the cost of living, Madam Speaker, would go down on day one. Donald Trump promised to lower costs on day one, but costs in the United States of America haven't gone down, they've gone up. The cost of living is totally out of control. Why? Because of Republican policies. First, the Trump tariffs, raising costs on everyday Americans by thousands of dollars per year. Second, in your one big ugly bill, in order to fund the Republican violent mass deportation machine, ripping away health care and nutritional assistance from the American people at a time when health insurance costs are already out of control and grocery prices are through the roof. And third, Donald Trump and Republicans have gotten this country into a reckless and costly war of choice that has skyrocketed gas prices through the roof, burdening everyday Americans who are already struggling to survive. Certainly can't thrive, struggling to survive. Living paycheck to paycheck. High rent, high groceries, high gas prices, high health insurance costs. And when I look at the Republican scheme that this budget represents, not a single sentence about making life more affordable for the American people. Republicans want to cut health care and cut nutritional assistance, send us to a reckless and costly war of choice, impose tariffs that are raising prices on everyday Americans by thousands of dollars per year, and then use taxpayer dollars to give a $70 billion blank check to ICE so that the Republican violent mass deportation machine can continue to brutalize or kill American citizens like Alex Preddy and Renee Nicole Good, or to violently target law-abiding immigrant families. Democrats here are not simply a no, we're a hell no on this legislation. And we are going to continue to fight to make life better for the American people. We believe that America is far too expensive. We believe that far too many people are working hard, playing by the rules, can't thrive, can barely survive. We believe that in this great country, when you're doing the right thing, when you're working hard, you should be able to live an affordable life. That's not happening right now. A comfortable life. That's not happening right now for far too many people. You should be able to live a good life, a good paying job, good housing, good health care, good education for your children, and a good retirement. Which, by the way, means we will always defend Social Security and Medicare. And as a warning to the American people, the Speaker of the House recently said, in part as a result of what Republicans have done to skyrocket the debt and the deficit by trillions of dollars, to give your MAGA donors massive tax breaks that they don't need and do not deserve, that Republicans are coming next for the Social Security and for the Medicare of the American people. Madam Speaker, the Republican majority has failed. This Congress has failed. Life hasn't gotten better. Over the last 18 months, life has gotten worse, more expensive, because of policy choices that the Republicans have made to inflict policy violence and cruelty on the American people. And this toxic piece of legislation is just another example of how Republicans have failed the American people. And so we will be voting no against this Republican scheme, and we will continue to fight to drive down the high cost of living, fight to lower and fix our broken healthcare system, fight to get ICE under control, fight to end Donald Trump's reckless and costly war of choice, and fight for an America where everyone can afford a high-quality life for themselves and for their families. That's not the America that we have right now because of Republican policy failures and continued schemes like this Republican budget reconciliation bill to waste another $70 billion on your extreme immigration policies that have failed America. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Madam Speaker, it's my honor to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from the great state of Louisiana, the Majority Leader of the People's House, Mr. Steve Scalise.
Without objection.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to my colleague and friend from Texas for yielding. I rise in strong support of this bill. And Madam Speaker, we should all be here today to express our strong support for this important piece of legislation to properly, fully fund the Department of Homeland Security, including, yes, the people who actually are tasked with carrying out our immigration laws. That's the job of ICE and CBP. These are the laws that we all pass. I know our colleagues on the other side of the aisle would love to go back to open borders. But they're not, fortunately, going to go back to open borders because we won't let them. Madam Chair, we worked with President Trump to secure the border. In fact, it was the #1 issue in the 2024 election. the American people spoke loud and clear. And yes, that was on the ballot. And everybody knew where each side was. And you would think now that that issue is resolved, that we could be here in Congress to work together to properly make sure that we fund the Department of Homeland Security. But sadly, that's not what has happened. You've seen the Democrats time and time again shut this department down. The Department of Homeland Security, formed out of September 11th. You would think some people on the other side of the aisle are acting like it's still September 10th, like we don't have threats on our homeland. But we have threats coming from more places than ever because the other side let millions of people into our country. Millions of people illegally come into our country, including many violent criminals. They want you to think, Madam Chair, that it's just everybody coming in to seek the American dream. We have a legal method for that to happen. Every country does, by the way. The United States is the most generous nation in the world in terms of our legal process to come to America. Yes, legal. That means you have to follow the rules to be a part of this great American dream. And if somebody doesn't want to follow those rules, including the prior president, then what it does is wreak havoc. And what kind of havoc? I know the other side loves to just attack law enforcement every single day. The party that tried to defund the police, yes, they're still at it. This vote today, make no mistake, if you're voting yes, you're not only voting to secure America's border, you're voting to fund law enforcement. And if you vote no, you are voting to defund the police. Those are the people, the law enforcement officers, risking their lives to keep our community safe. And I think, Madam Chair, it's important to say safe from whom? Let's walk a little bit down memory lane and talk about some of the American citizens who are no longer with us today because of people who came into this country illegally, because of Joe Biden's open border, because of the policies that the Democrat Party on the other side, Madam Speaker, wants us to go back to. They want open borders. That's why they're voting no. Make no mistake about it. This vote is about opening the border again. This vote is about defunding the police. We cannot let that happen. Why? Let's remember Laken Riley. Did some on the other side already forget who Laken Riley is? 22-year-old nursing student killed while jogging near the University of Georgia campus in February of 2024. The man convicted of her murder was, yes, a man from Venezuela who entered into the United States illegally. Let's talk about Sheridan Gorman, Madam Speaker. 18-year-old Loyola University, Chicago freshman, who was shot and killed in March of 2026. The suspect, Jose Medina, an illegal immigrant from Venezuela. Stephanie Minter, a Virginia mother, was fatally stabbed at a Fairfax County bus stop in February of this year. Yes, anybody who votes no is voting against the people who are stopping criminal illegals who are murdering American citizens still to this day. And yet they're going to cast that no vote, Madam Speaker. Stephanie Minter, who was murdered, her suspect, Abdul Jula, came here illegally. An immigrant from Sierra Leone with over 30 police arrests. 30 times arrested over and over again until finally he murdered somebody. And you look at these sanctuary cities. By the way, go look at who's running these sanctuary cities. When these Democrats are coming up here saying they want to grab more power, asking you to give them power again, look at what they do with power. They install sanctuary city policies. They let murderers go out of prison over and over again until they murder innocent citizens. You can just go look at the leadership of every Democrat-run city in America right now. Most of the states that have major losses of population because of their policies. Now, where are they going? Mostly to red states. States that are run by Republicans who want to lower taxes, who want to have common sense policy to get away from the crazy policies that we're seeing over and over again in these Democrat-run states. In fact, the policies are so bad that you can look at the city of Chicago and know you will no longer be able to go to Chicago to see the Chicago Bears play football because Illinois ran the Chicago Bears out of the state of Illinois, out of the city of Chicago, over to Indiana because they're so anti-business, because they're so anti-worker, because they won't stand up and protect their own citizens. You listen to the people that get up here, Mr. Speaker, day in and day out, and attack President Trump over and over again. What they don't tell you is that President Trump has gotten, because he focused on border security and protecting the American citizens, we now have the lowest murder rate in the United States in over 100 years. Over 100 years, the lowest murder rate, because President Trump cares about people, cares about protecting people in their communities. But of course, you look at some of these Democrat-run cities over and over again where they let illegals out over and over again. Go back to the suspect who murdered Stephanie Minter in Virginia. He was in prison and let out over 30 times. Let's talk about Kayla Hamilton, a 20-year-old Maryland woman strangled to death in 2022 by a known MS-13 gang member from El Salvador. Rachel Morin, a Maryland mother of 5 who was murdered while exercising on a hiking trail in 2023. Yes, it was someone who came here illegally who murdered her, who was finally later committed of that crime, convicted. Jacqueline Nungary, a 12-year-old Houston girl who was sexually assaulted and then murdered in June of 2024, Mr. Speaker. 2 Venezuelans who entered the United States illegally were charged in that case. Keep in mind, every one of these I'm reading, we're about to have a vote to say, should we have people working for ICE, working for CBP, protecting us from these violent criminals who are coming into our country illegally to kill our citizens? And you're going to be able to vote yes or no. And if you vote no, you're saying you want these people to keep coming in. You're voting to defund the law enforcement officers, Mr. Speaker, who are going to stop these criminals from coming into our communities. It's not like some hypothetical. It's happened over and over and over again. Sadly, there are more. Luis Jackson Nanez Lopez, 15-year-old, shot and killed while trying to protect his mother from an attempted rape by an illegal in Kentucky. The killer was a Mexican national. Haley Halgeson and Brady Heiling, 18 and 19-year-olds, killed in a car crash by a Honduran national who was driving intoxicated down the wrong direction on a highway. This took place in a sanctuary jurisdiction in Wisconsin. So they act like they're doing you a favor. Just look the other way at the laws, except their own citizens are dying. Megan Boss, killed by a Mexican in Illinois in 2025. After the killer's court appearance, a sanctuary city judge freed him onto the streets of Chicago. There that is again. Fortunately, it was ICE who rearrested that murderer. And they want to make ICE out to be the enemy? They're defending the murderers. Over and over again, they want to defund law enforcement to stand up for criminals who are wreaking havoc in our communities all across this country. Thank God we have a president in Donald Trump who's willing to stand up for the American people and protect us, to keep us safe in our homeland. That's the whole purpose of the Department of Homeland Security. It's why it needs to be fully funded. We need to pass this bill. It should have been done months ago, and it should not be partisan. Everybody should vote for it. But when that board lights up, you're going to see who's standing with the American people to keep us safe in our home and who's going to defend the criminals. I stand with the American people and say, let's keep our community safe, Mr. Speaker. Let's pass this bill. Let's fund this department. I yield back the balance of my time.
I thank the Majority Leader, Mr. Speaker, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
You know, Mr. Speaker, we heard a lot of words there. What I didn't hear, though, was even one word, just one, about what this reconciliation bill would do to lower costs for the American people. I didn't hear one word for the 15 million Americans about to be kicked off their health care. I didn't hear one word about those who are paying 50% more for gas than what they were paying just a couple months ago because of this president's reckless war of choice. Nothing. No words, no plans, nothing in their bill whatsoever to bring down costs for the American people. Mr. Speaker, with that, I am very happy to yield 1.5 minutes to my good friend from California, distinguished member of the Budget Committee, Mr. Panetta.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Republicans' reconciliation bill gives a blank check again to ICE and Border Patrol. Instead of reining in and reforming these two agencies that brought chaos and controversy to so many communities across our country, this bill instead provides $70 billion more to ICE and CBP without any guardrails or safeguards for the American public. Now, in the One Big Beautiful Bill, you already injected $140 billion into these two agencies, money used to rush agents through training, push them into the streets, to troll big box store parking lots and target immigrants well beyond gang members and felons. They called themselves law enforcement, but what we saw from many agents is acting like a lawless mob with impunity and a disregard for our humanity. Now, I support a secure border, but before I give one more cent to ICE and Border Patrol, all we are asking is for commonsensical reforms. Take off the masks, turn on the cameras, identify yourselves, independent investigation, stay away from polling places, and get a warrant before you come into our homes. But instead, your bill ignores bipartisan reforms, ignores high prices, ignores the war in Iran, and hands over billions more to ICE and CBP without any guidance on how to spend it and without any way to pay for it. By voting for this reconciliation bill, you're not only giving a blank check to ICE and CBP, you're giving in to Donald Trump, and you're giving up on your responsibility to the stability of our economy, the debt of our country, and the safety of American communities. And with that, I yield back.
I reserve.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to my friend from the Keystone State, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. He's also Vice Chairman of the Budget Committee, Mr. Lloyd Smucker.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
I'd like to thank the chairman for yielding. It's like the Democrats have developed amnesia. They talk about high prices, but inflation went to 9%, triple what it is today during the Biden years. It averaged more than double what it is today. And talk about working class Americans, they, by voting against the One Big Beautiful Bill, voted for what would have been the largest tax increase on working families in history had Republicans not voted to pass that bill. And then Democrats held hostage $14 million in wages from working Americans by shutting down the government and cost the American economy $11 billion. And despite their efforts, though, to undermine the success of the working families' tax cuts, we're still seeing strong job numbers and a resilient economy as a result of Republican policies. But let's talk about the border for just a second. Maybe it's not amnesia. Maybe they want the thousands of people pouring across the border.
Another minute, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's recognized.
Maybe they want the thousands of people, the caravans that came across the border during the Biden years. President Trump was right. It just takes a president to make that change and to secure the border. The American people deserve a secure border. They want a secure border. They deserve a functioning immigration system, and they deserve a government that's focused on them, not these partisan games. Today, by passing this bill, we stand ready to finish the job of funding border security, restoring immigration enforcement, and putting the safety and interests of American citizens first. I urge support for this legislation, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman, Mr. Speaker, and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1.5 minutes to the gentlewoman from Vermont, distinguished member of the Budget Committee, Ms. Ballant.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in strong opposition to the Republican reconciliation bill. While American families struggle to afford housing health care, and groceries, Republicans are proposing to spend more than $150 billion on immigration enforcement, roughly $59 billion for detention and deportation operations. Working families right now can't afford a doctor's visit, and Republicans are worried about multiplying our budget for detention facilities, not lowering health care costs, not giving relief to families who are struggling with obscenely high insurance premiums, but instead giving even more money to ICE and Border Patrol. This bill says that while American families pay nearly $27,000 a year for health insurance costs, Congress should prioritize spending even more on ICE detention beds. Healthcare costs are rising faster than wages for many Americans, and this is what we're focused on. It's incredibly screwed up. This administration wants you to believe that people who don't look like you or don't sound like you are the source of your financial struggles. Trump and his allies do this so you don't see that their policies benefit billionaires and greedy corporations that have hollowed out the middle class in this country. Don't believe them, not for a minute. We should be lowering health care costs. We should be investing in the working families in our communities across this country, not weaponizing our government agencies.
Members are reminded to direct their comments to the chair. The lady's time has expired.
Yeah, I'll yield an additional 15 seconds.
Gentlelady is recognized.
We should be lowering health care costs and investing in the working families and communities across this country, not weaponizing our government to go after the most vulnerable. I yield back.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to my friend from the state of California, Mr. Tom McClintock, also Budget Committee member.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, for 4 years, Democrats actively encouraged the largest illegal mass migration in history, including the most vicious criminals in the world. For the last year, these same Democrats have done everything they can to obstruct, impede, and even attack federal officers who are trying to enforce our immigration laws. Without CBP and ICE enforcing our immigration laws, we have no borders, which means we have no country. That is the effect, if not the design, of the Democrats' refusal to fund these agencies. This bill breaks the Democrat stranglehold over ICE and CBP funding. Reconciliation is specifically designed to bring mandatory spending in line with limits set by the budget resolution. Instead, we have no choice but to use it to restore the security of our nation. We'll have one more shot at reconciliation for the coming fiscal year, and it must be used to fulfill our responsibility to future generations who are already drowning in our debt. I yield back.
Expired.
I reserve.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
From
I'm sorry,
Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania.
That's an insult, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentlewoman from Washington State, distinguished member of the Budget Committee, Ms. Jayapal.
The lady from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gas prices have almost doubled since Trump came in and started his illegal Iran war. Groceries, housing, and health care are all unaffordable. Republicans would have you believe that there's no money to help working families. Trump himself said that he does not, quote, think about Americans' financial situation. And he said that it's, quote, not possible for the government to fund Medicare, Medicaid, and child care. Just last week, Republicans slashed $141 million for food for pregnant women and children. But now, magically, Republicans have found another $70 billion for ICE and CBP, even though those agencies still have $100 billion left from the $140 billion that Republicans gave them in the big bad betrayal bill. Meanwhile, Trump's masked ICE agents are killing U.S. citizens in broad daylight, kidnapping and disappearing parents in front of their children's schools, and ramming down doors without warrants. Private for-profit prison operators are laughing all the way to the bank as they rake in billions in profits by incarcerating over 60,000 1,000 immigrants of all immigration statuses every single night, refusing to uphold basic standards or give medical care to people in custody. And since Trump came back into office as ranking member of the Immigration
Lady's time has
Subcommittee,
expired.
Yield an additional 15 seconds.
Gentlelady is recognized.
as the ranking member of the Immigration Subcommittee, I get notified every time there is a death in detention, and there have been 50 unprecedented deaths in detention since Trump came into office. This bill, zero guardrails, throws another $70 billion. Vote no. It's a sham.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to my friend from the Hoosier State, Mr. Stutzman, again for a minute, member of the Budget Committee.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank the chairman. I rise today in support of the Secure America Act to fund ICE and CBP. ICE and CBP agents risk their lives daily to keep bad actors out and protect our nation's citizens. With the strong leadership of Secretary Mullen, CBP reached a milestone by seizing more than 100 million lethal doses of fentanyl along the southwest border since October. ICE agents also have made progress towards making American cities safe again, with over 1,400 arrests of known or suspected terrorists. These federal agents don't just protect our borders, they defend and protect American families across the country, especially as the U.S. hosts the World Cup starting this week. I stand in strong opposition to the Democrats who wish to put American lives at risk by refusing to fund these two agencies. Start supporting the American citizens and not illegals. I encourage all my colleagues to support the funding for the vital work of ICE and CBP. And I'll yield back.
Reserve, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1.5 minutes to the member from California, Ms. Chu.
Gentleman from California, Gentlelady from California is recognized.
Once again, Republicans are showing the American people exactly where their priorities lie. They claim there is no money for health care, no money for affordable housing, no money for child care, no money for gas, which costs an arm and a leg. Yet today, Republicans are demanding another $70 billion to supercharge Trump's mass deportation agenda. Plus, ICE already got $170 billion from Republicans' big, ugly bill, making them our highest funded law enforcement agency. The message couldn't be clearer. There's always money to target immigrants, but never enough for working families. And let's be clear what Republicans are asking taxpayers for. These agencies have failed to produce meaningful accountability, transparency, or reform, even after killing 2 U.S. citizens. At the same time, detainees are dying in ICE custody at record rates. Last week, I visited Adelanto ICE Detention Center in Southern California. I spoke directly with detainees who described inhumane conditions like dirty drinking water, inedible food, and non-existent medical care. Some have even watched their neighbors die. This is what this administration wants another $70 billion for. At a time when Americans are desperate for relief, Republicans are choosing to invest billions in a system that fails to uphold basic standards of safety, dignity, and accountability. I'm voting no. I yield back.
I reserve.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. The gentleman from Texas is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield a minute to my friend from Texas, Mr. Gill, who's also a proud member of the Budget Committee.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's no surprise that the party of defund the police is the party that also votes to defund Border Patrol for 70 days. It's no surprise that the party who runs a Senate candidate in Texas who wants to welcome Matt on the southern border is the party that will vote to defund ICE. This is the same party that for 4 years intentionally flooded our country with millions of illegal aliens. And we hear questions like, how does this make life better for the American people? Well, I'll tell you that deporting criminals, murderers, rapists, and thugs out of our country makes our communities safer. Deporting illegal aliens who are clogging up our schools and our hospitals, who are on welfare and using our social services, makes life in America better for our people. Mr. Speaker, I would ask, when will our colleagues on the other side of the aisle finally put the interests of our people, the people we represent, ahead of the interests of illegal aliens? I'm waiting. I urge my colleagues to support this bill because it's a great bill, and with that, I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for a minute.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from New York, distinguished member of the Budget Committee, Mr. Tonko.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've spent my career fighting for improved mental health care in our schools and communities. I believe that every single child should grow up in an environment built around love, around learning and safety, which is why I'm so disgusted by the actions of this administration that are terrorizing an entire generation of children. Children who are seeing their friends and teachers taken by ICE. Children who are being held at gunpoint by masked agents. Children who are living in fear that their parents will be picked up by ICE. Children who are being detained for months on end. Children who are being used as bait so that ICE can detain their family members. Those experiences do not fade easily. Our government is inflicting trauma on our kids. We should all be ashamed of these actions. Yet, instead of stopping ICE's reign of terror, Republicans are pushing legislation that provides this out-of-control agency with tens of billions more in funding, billions of taxpayer dollars to terrorize our children, our neighbors, instead of supporting our schools, our hospitals, or our communities. My choice is clear. I urge my colleagues to join me and reject this cruel bill. Our children and their families demand it. With that, I yield back.
I reserve.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, if anybody's living in fear, it's because of the fear-mongering that we continue to hear from our Democrat colleagues. And it's no wonder. It starts at the top, right? The nominee or the anointed presidential nominee of the Democrats in the last presidential election, Ms. Kamala Harris, compared ICE to the KKK. We heard references to the Gestapo, a reign of terror, we just heard. It's no wonder that there are people in the streets obstructing and putting at risk the lives of our law enforcement officers who are trying to clean up our neighborhoods from the deluge of gangbangers and criminals who have flooded cities and towns all across this great nation. And it's a travesty to hear such denigrating terms, to see my colleagues in the United States House chamber vilifying people who wear the uniform on behalf of all of us and our families. And like I said, assaults are up by 1,300%, death threats by 8,000%. It's a wonder more law enforcement officials and ICE agents haven't been hurt, but let me tell you who's going to get hurt. Lots of people across this land, if ICE and CBP were defunded on account of not having willing Republicans to fund them fully, not just for 1 year, but for 3 years, so we never end up here again being held hostage by shutdowns and defunding of our law enforcement. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield to my friend and the gentlelady from the great state of Florida. 1 minute, Ms. Laura Lee.
The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of the Secure America Act, legislation that will secure our border, provide critical resources to law enforcement, and make our communities safer. I want to highlight a provision of this bill that I have spent years fighting to advance, along with the Tim Tebow Foundation and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the bipartisan Renewed Hope Act. Today, more than 89,000 children depicted in child sex abuse material remain unidentified. That means 89,000 children who have not yet been found, not yet rescued, not yet safe. The Renewed Hope Act will give Homeland Security investigations the analysts, forensic specialists, technology, and training that are needed to identify those children, rescue them, bring them home, and bring their predators to justice. For every child still waiting to be found, this is renewed hope. Every vote for this bill is a vote to find these children. I urge my colleagues, Republicans and Democrats alike, to do the right thing, fight for these children, and support this legislation. Thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, distinguished member of the Budget Committee, Mr. Doggett.
The gentleman from Texas will be recognized for 1.5 minutes.
This bill should really be known as the Big Slush. It's a slush fund to enrich our corrupt president and a slush fund for ICE to continue abusing communities across America. Grocery prices soar, gas prices surge, and to the Trump regime, it's really just peanuts. Peanuts of the type, perhaps, that are served on that luxury jet that Kristi Noem purchased and wasted taxpayer funds on so she could ride in style to support her ICE agents terrorizing too many Americans. After filing a $10 billion bogus lawsuit against his own administration, Trump incredibly reached a sordid deal with his personal criminal defense attorney, who he has appointed acting attorney general, to stop tax evasion audits of Trump, his family, and all of the Trump enterprises. Special treatment that has been estimated to save him over $100 million. And on top of that, he gets to control a taxpayer-funded $1.8 billion tax slush fund that can be used to reward the rioters that were here on January 6 who assaulted police and other Trump pals and criminals. Law-abiding neighborhoods facing ICE cruelty, while convicted criminals get a check at your expense. What we need is a genuine check on the Trump regime, but there's no rule of law, no checks and balances. Trump knows that a compliant Republican Congress will let him get away with anything. This bill doesn't secure America, it secures Trump's stranglehold on the Republicans. I yield back.
Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the president. The gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, just to be clear, we're attempting here in a Republican-only exercise to fund ICE and CBP at last year's operating budget plus inflation. That's all we're talking about. And their position is they want to zero it out. In fact, they already have. And they refuse to fund ICE and CBP. They would effectively abolish it. So this is not a slush fund unless you're calling what is the normal and regular operating budget of our immigration enforcement and Border Patrol officers slush fund. It's regular, normal funding. And we're going to do it not for 1 year, but for 3 years so that we don't end up here again. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield to my friend from the great state of Texas for 1 minute, member of the House Judiciary Committee, Mr. Lance Gooden.
The member from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What we've heard today from Democrats is Trump, 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 Trump. They're obsessed. They won't talk about the bill. They're talking about the president because they're ashamed, they know they should be, of their record when they were in charge. When President Biden was president, the border was wide open. Americans were getting killed, and Democrats wouldn't acknowledge it. And that's why we have the majority now. That's why President Trump is in the White House, because he promised to clean it up, and he has. And this bill continues that. And for 76 days, Democrats blocked funding for the entire Department of Homeland Security. And they're continuing to stand against this today, but they won't actually come out and say what we know they mean, and that's that they want an open border. Instead, they want to talk about Trump. And the Secure America Act ensures that that border is never open again. By fully funding ICE and CBP through President Trump's term, this bill gives our homeland defenders the resources they need to strengthen deportation operations, dismantle criminal networks, and stop fentanyl before it reaches our communities. And so while my colleagues across the aisle continue suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, I urge passage, and I thank the Republican majority and President Trump for leading on this. I yield back.
I reserve, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, it's interesting. I've been participating and listening to this entire debate. Actually, the president's name who has come up the most is President Biden. I think they actually miss him because they would like someone to blame other than the man who is in the White House right now. The American people make it clear. Some of the worst approval ratings on the economy in 20-plus years. By a 3-to-1 margin, the American people disapprove of this president's handling of the economy. 72% disapprove. Again, the worst numbers since the Great Recession. So they need someone else to blame because they know just how poorly things are going right now under this president and Republican leadership. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from the Commonwealth of Kentucky, distinguished member of the Budget Committee, Mr. McGarvey.
The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for a minute.
Mr. Speaker, we got to stop saying this is about $70 billion for ICE. This is about $240 billion for ICE. Republicans gave ICE $170 billion last July, and in less than 1 year, they want to give them $70 billion more. That's more for ICE this year than Russia is spending on its military, and they're currently at war. $240 billion for honest-to-God stormtroopers, masked, armed agents, kidnapping people off the street, murdering U.S. citizens, separating families, and detaining children. We shouldn't give them another dollar. We cannot give them another $70 billion. But if you're so willing to spend it, imagine the good we could do with that kind of money. We could make people's lives better. A free school breakfast and lunch for every kid in America. Free childcare for every American family with a kid under 5. We could bring back the health care tax credits that Republicans killed because they were too expensive for 3 more years. But since feeding kids and fixing health care apparently aren't your thing, maybe we can agree on veterans. You guys say you care about our veterans. Then let's do something about it. For $70 billion, we could end veteran homelessness forever, probably 7 times over. In fact, I offered an amendment to this bill that does just that. And actually, with $70 billion, we could end homelessness in America. And that's just one example. There's so much good we could do with this money, and just about anything would be better than giving it to ICE. Vote no. I yield back.
I reserve.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it's often been said that budgets are a statement of our priorities and our values. Repeatedly, President Biden would propose cuts to the Department of Homeland Security. The last year he was in office, in fact, Homeland Security was cut by 3.5%. Remember, this is all the while we had record numbers of illegal immigrants flooding into this country, record numbers of immigrants who are on the terrorist watch list, record number of criminals, record number of drugs killing Americans at record levels, about a plane load of Americans dying a week. Meanwhile, my Democrat colleagues found time to give $800 billion in tax subsidies to green energy corporations. Just think about that. Tax cuts for the rich green energy corporations, tens of billions of dollars with a cell phone and a pen by Joe Biden. That's the monies that were given to illegal immigrants for health care that U.S. hardworking taxpayers funded. According to Numbers USA, we're spending about $9,000 per illegal immigrant in this country, Mr. Speaker. That's more than we spend on our most vulnerable for Medicaid, U.S. citizens. Mr. Speaker, I yield 1.5 minutes to my friend from the great state of South Carolina, Mr. Russell Fry, who is also a House Judiciary Committee member.
The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the chairman for yielding time. The Mexican cartels have never had better lobbyists than the Democrat politicians across the aisle who insisted that nothing was wrong for years. As our communities were flooded, Democrats told the American people not to believe their own eyes, not to see the rising crime and the malaise and the fracturing and the problems in every community across this country. When the border was overwhelmed, they said it was secure. In fact, they told us that we were imagining a border crisis. When communities demanded action, they offered excuses. And when law enforcement came forward and said, we need resources, they were lectured by the ivory tower that Democrats sit in about compassion. Their immigration policy boiled down to three simple words: deny, deflect, and delay. Their strategy was overwhelmingly rejected, thankfully, at the ballot box in the last presidential cycle, but they refused to accept it. They refused to accept the reality. The American people are done being put last at the expense of themselves and put in place illegal immigrants. They're tired of being treated as if nothing is wrong. Something has been fundamentally wrong with our border for a long time, and when we want to come and fix it and listen to the people who sent us to Washington to fix the most fundamental thing about a country, its borders, we're told all types of measures of things. We're here on an immigration bill or on a border bill, and we're told we're dealing with the economy on their end. This is about the border and securing the most fundamentally sacred thing in our country, which is our border. I think this is basic stuff. Fund law enforcement. Don't defund them. Let them enforce the law and do their job. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1.5 minutes to the gentlewoman from Minnesota, distinguished member of the Budget Committee, Ms. Omar.
Gentlewoman from Minnesota is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to this reconciliation bill. Last year, Republicans handed ICE and CBP an $85 billion slush fund. Today, they want $70 billion more, with no reforms, no accountability for the crimes they have committed. And this is at a time when Americans are barely making ends meet. Let me tell you what the money could mean for working families. It could provide free childcare for over 1 million children for 2 years. We could expand and extend the ACA premium tax credit for at least a year. And we could cancel the Medicare debt of 1/3 of Americans. Instead, congressional Republicans want to hand more money to the same rogue agents that have kidnapped and killed Americans across the country. We know who is really paying for this. When federal agents flooded Minneapolis, our city suffered $200 million in economic damages at least. Workers stayed home, small businesses shattered, and tens of thousands of residents were left thrown out into food and housing insecurity. This is why I will be introducing a bill to redirect ICE's slush fund to the very communities that the agency has terrorized and harmed. This is who this money should be going to: everyday Americans who are just trying to survive in Trump's disastrous economy. I won't support another dollar for ICE, and I urge my colleagues to vote against this bill. And I yield back.
I reserve.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it's true. We did put tens of billions of dollars in the first reconciliation bill because the Democrats' open wreaked havoc on the current system. It overwhelmed us. My state spent $14 billion to do the job the federal government wouldn't do. We didn't have the infrastructure. We didn't have the boots on the ground. We didn't have the judicial process set up to take on the millions of people, over 10 million people, over 5 of them released, not apprehended and held accountable, caught and released. And so the system was overwhelmed. We needed to infuse some capital to boost the infrastructure so we could seamlessly work through that. We're talking about regular operating budgets now. And the regular operating budgets, not what we had to put in for the system that was overwhelmed by the record numbers of illegal immigrants. We're talking about last year's budget plus inflation. The bottom line is, my Democrat colleagues stand on the position of defunding immigration enforcement and effectively abolishing ICE. And I think that's an untenable position in this country. And only a few radicals hold that position. And most people know what we're up against and what these hardworking, brave people do for us. With that, I yield a minute to my friend from South Carolina, Ms. Sherry Biggs, who's on the Homeland Security Committee here in the House.
The gentlewoman is recognized for a minute.
Thank you very much to my colleague. And Mr. Speaker, the Secure America Act gives Border Patrol and ICE the resources they need to keep doing what is working. Southwest border apprehensions are down 94% compared to the Biden administration. This fiscal year's total CBP encounters are already 13% lower than April of 2024 alone, and CBP has seized 61% more drugs this fiscal year than during the same period last year. That means fewer illegal crossings, more fentanyl stopped, and stronger enforcement. This bill invests in agents, in officers, in technology, and the tools needed to dismantle cartels, stop human trafficking, and remove criminal illegal aliens from our communities. President Trump has proven that a secure border is possible. Now Congress needs to back him up. South Carolina families deserve safety, they deserve sovereignty, and a government that puts America first. I urge my colleagues to support the Secure America Act, and I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, how much time do I'll reserve my time. How much time do I have?
Gentleman has a minute and a quarter remaining.
Thank you. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Rhode Island, distinguished member of the Budget Committee, Mr. Amo.
The gentleman from Rhode Island will be recognized for a minute.
Mr. Speaker, when I first heard the bill name, I thought someone said Less Secure America Act. After reading it, I realized that's what it is. Republicans already handed Trump's immigration machine a massive windfall in their big ugly law as they cut your health care. Now they're back for more. This latest scheme is about pouring $70 billion into ICE and CBP while leaving untouched Trump's $1.8 billion slush fund for his political allies and January 6 cop beaters. It does nothing to lower costs, nothing to stop corruption, and nothing to help working families. Think about that. If you're worried about your grocery costs or your utility bills, Republicans have nothing for you. If you're worried about your health care costs, Republicans have nothing for you. If you're worried about affording child care, Republicans have nothing for you. But if you're Donald Trump, looking for billions more to expand ICE and bankroll more abuses of power, Republicans are happy to write the check with your money. This bill isn't about security. It's about cruelty, corruption, and misplaced priorities. You deserve better than this latest devious deception. The American people deserve lower costs, safer communities, and a government that works for them, not another blank check for Trump's chaos. I urge a no vote on Republicans' latest betrayal, and I yield back.
I reserve.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. The question is, does the gentleman from Texas reserve?
I reserve.
The gentleman from Texas shall reserve. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland, distinguished ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Raskin.
The gentleman from Maryland will be recognized for a minute and a half.
Thank you. I can understand why our colleagues talking about deranged Trump syndrome don't want us talking about the actual president himself. He just said, I don't think about Americans' financial situation, not even a little bit. Well, no kidding. But our let them eat crypto president, who's pocketed a cool $5 billion since he was inaugurated, spends a lot of time thinking about his own financial security and the bankrolling of his MAGA foot soldiers, whom he pardoned en masse and released from jail last year. He wants you to pay for not only a $1 billion golden ballroom, because he bulldozed the White House, but a $1.776 billion political slush fund under his exclusive control to pay out to his favorite convicted criminals, anti-democracy rioters, and cop-beating insurrectionists, 96 of whom have already committed new crimes since he let them out of jail, including child sexual assault, domestic violence, home invasion, and first-degree criminal assault. He wants to turn this street-fighting mob into a permanent private militia of MAGA millionaires. His acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche, cooked up a collusive plan with the plaintiff president to cancel out all criminal, civil, and tax liability for himself and the rest of the Trump family and their businesses for all time. In all caps, they wrote forever, for any crimes they've committed up until this point. Nothing like this has ever happened before in American history. And now they want to hand DHS another $70 billion after the $170 billion they got last year, despite, could I have 30 seconds? Despite the fact that DHS still has $100 billion sitting around unspent, and despite the fact they've done nothing, zero, to reform the King Kong police practices that left 2 American citizens, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, dead, lying in their own blood in the streets of Minneapolis. Vote no.
Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the president, and their comments should be directed to the chair.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve, and may I also inquire as to how much time I have remaining?
The gentleman from Pennsylvania has 7 minutes and 3/4.
Thank you. I reserve.
The question is, does the gentleman from Texas reserve?
Mr. Speaker, I just want to say it's notable that not once has any reference been made by my Democrat colleagues to the victims of crimes perpetrated by criminal aliens on them and the loss and the pain and suffering of their families. Not one time. Not one time. Not one time. And no, not once have we heard, Mr. Speaker, any reference with respect, with honor and dignity to the law enforcement officers who wear the uniform, who fight the fight to keep us safe, risking their lives to rid this country of the threats to our neighborhoods and our families. And not one time we heard reign of terror, we heard Gestapo, we hear all these things. Not one time. Mr. Speaker, I yield or reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Mississippi, distinguished ranking member of the Homeland Security Committee, Mr. Thompson.
The gentleman from Mississippi will be recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand with my Democratic colleagues in strong opposition to this bill. This bill is yet another attempt by MAGA-controlled Republicans to give billions of dollars to the violent, lawless, and unconstitutional Trump administration. In last year, Big Ugly Bill, Republicans starved working families and stripped health care from millions of Americans to fund DHS's immigration crackdown without any guardrails. DHS used these funds to break into homes without warrants, surveil and lock up nonviolent protesters, deport sick children with cancer, and kill 2 American citizens who were lawfully exercising their First and Second Amendment rights. This bill, just like the last one, does not prohibit any agent from wearing masks. It does not require officers to get judicial warrants. This bill does not prohibit racial profiling or surveillance databases of unlawful protesters. It does not stop raids at daycares, churches, or even hospitals. And this bill does not prevent the Justice Department from creating a slush fund to pay Donald Trump's insurrectionists who assaulted law enforcement. Instead, this bill gives the Trump regime a blank check to execute more out-of-control, unaccountable crackdowns on migrants and American citizens supporting them. Americans know the difference.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Additional 15 seconds.
Gentleman is recognized.
Americans know the difference between a government that works for them and one that works only for Donald Trump. We must oppose this awful bill. I yield back.
I reserve.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. The gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now yield 1.5 minutes to the gentlewoman from New York, the distinguished ranking member of the Small Business Committee, Ms. Velasquez.
The gentlewoman from New York will be recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, almost a year ago, we debated a horrific piece of Republican legislation that cut more than $1 trillion from health care and nearly $200 billion in food assistance for hungry families. Also, billionaires could get another tax cut. That same bill handed over $170 billion to DHS for immigration enforcement, money used to supercharge ICE and CBP as they terrorize immigrant communities, trampled the Constitution, brutalized and killed American citizens in the streets. Since then, life has only gotten more unaffordable. So what is the Republican answer? Another $70 billion for immigration enforcement that is already out of control. It is a slap in the face to every American struggling to get by. It is a slap in the face to every small business in this country that is struggling. I urge my colleagues to vote no, and I yield back.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Does the gentleman from Texas continue to reserve?
Yes, I do, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Colorado, the Assistant Democratic Leader, Mr. Neguse.
Gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the Speaker. I want to thank the ranking member of the Budget Committee for his leadership. I don't serve on the Budget Committee, but my understanding of the Budget Committee, perhaps a naive understanding, was that the committee would try to build a responsible budget to live within its means. But I must say with deep regret, Mr. Speaker, I have respect for my colleague, the chairman of the Budget Committee, but every time he comes to the floor, it ends up costing us all more money. This bill is going to increase the deficit by $70 billion. $70 billion with a B, dollars. That's how much the Republican Budget Committee proposes that we spend, that we impair our national deficit. For all of the Freedom Caucus members, for all of the Republicans who have come to the floor to shed crocodile tears about the fiscal health of our country, understand that in half an hour you'll be voting in favor of a bill that increases the deficit
Gentleman's time has
by
expired.
$70 billion, Mr. Speaker. We ought to reject it.
Gentleman will suspend.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Texas, do you continue to reserve?
We're talking about last year's budget plus inflation, Mr. Speaker. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Arizona, member of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, Mr. Stanton.
Gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong opposition to this extreme Republican budget bill, an additional $40 billion to ICE, an agency that has already received unprecedented amount of taxpayer funds with zero reforms, zero accountability, not a single dollar in this bill to lower the cost of living, nothing for families drowning under Trump's tariffs, nothing for skyrocketing grocery bills, nothing for the gas prices that have been driven up by a failing war of choice in Iran. This budget shows the American people where the MAGA Republicans' priorities lie. They will roll over to Trump every single time while their own constituents struggle to make ends meet. I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I am prepared to close.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentleman is recognized.
I want to use the remainder of my time to once again point out, as I said in the beginning, that this bill does absolutely nothing to prevent Donald Trump from handing taxpayer dollars to the violent criminals who attacked police officers here on January 6th. Now, we know this is not hypothetical. The president has said repeatedly that he wants to compensate January 6th rioters. Just this past weekend, he refused to rule out payments even for those who assaulted law enforcement officers at the Capitol. Mr. Speaker, let's remember what these criminals did. Rioters trapped Officer Daniel Hodges in a doorway, ripped away his gas mask as he was crushed and assaulted. Officer Michael Fanone was beaten, tased again and again, dragged into the crowd, and suffered a heart attack. Other officers were attacked with flagpoles and pepper sprayed. These rioters were not tourists. They were violent thugs who attempted to overturn an election by force. Now, let's not forget, this president has already pardoned them. He already gave them a free pass. Now he wants to reward them again with our taxpayer money. What a disgrace. For this reason, at the appropriate time, I will offer a motion to commit this bill back to committee. If the House rules permitted, I would have offered the motion with an important amendment to this bill. My amendment would make clear that not one penny of taxpayer money may be used to create, administer, or pay for any slush fund, settlement payment, or any other payout to January 6th insurrectionists. I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record the text of this amendment.
Without objection.
I hope my colleagues will join me in voting for the motion to commit, and with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas is recognized to close.
Mr. Speaker, as the good book says, where your treasure is, there your heart is also. Our treasure as Republicans and our hearts as the American people have reflected in this last and most historic election is with the law-abiding citizens of this great nation and the brave men and women who risk their lives to defend it every day. This is regular budget, normal budgets, and this is the least we can do to support those folks who stand on that thin line to defend our sovereign borders and our safety. I urge my Democrat colleagues, do not defund
The gentleman's time is
the
expired.
ICE and Border Patrol.
Gentleman yields back. All time for debate has expired.